Hello and welcome to this brand new episode of Silmarillion Film Project. I am your co-host Dave Kale, and this is a fun episode because we're finally going to wrap up script discussions from season 3. Or will we? Tune in to find out. It's a lot of suspense to find out whether we'll be able to do it.
That's right.
That's the plan anyway. We're going to knock out episodes 11 and 12 and 13, the season finale, and then we're going to hopefully get to sets and locations, which our listeners have very kindly gone through and provided lots of brainstorming and photos and things, which Marie collated for us in this lovely PowerPoint that Corey is showing you if you've tuned in live and you're watching. Hopefully we'll get to look at some of those. But
Oh yeah.
if history is any guide, next episode. And if you can probably hear, I am joined, as always, by the Tolkien professor Corey Olson and the Tolkien maven Trish Lambert. And then, of course, as we have been the last few episodes for our script discussions, we're also joined by Marie Prosser and Nick Palazzo, our what are your official job
Yeah,
titles?
you guys have you
say.
need job titles. Do you guys have a job title? Did you figure that out yet?
Are you like story editors, showrunners? You guys might be the showrunners.
No, you guys are the
We're the
showrunners, right?
showrunners?
No,
Yeah.
we're the execs. I think you guys are the you're like the head writers in the writers' room, running things, breaking stories.
Probably.
So yeah, I think you're
Hey,
showrunners.
if you want to declare me showrunner, I'll take it.
No, yeah, you guys are the ones that are responsible for
Yeah.
breaking the stories, managing the writers, and executing. And we're the people who just occasionally drop out of from on high and give you infeasible constraints to work with.
Okay, we can work with that model.
They're executing the writers too? Wow.
Yes, that's right.
Wait, you really don't want to give me that kind of power to execute people. I'm serious.
That's right.
Well,
We've given them the ultimate authority.
If it helps us keep the budget down.
Anytime anybody gets uppity, they just send me in. Well, that tends to happen on the board, so yeah.
That's right. Exactly. Cool. All right, so yes, welcome back, everybody. Good to be back, and I don't know, I'm so unapologetic about spending more time talking about the outlines, as I love going over and both reviewing and revising and sort of ironing out the stories. Love to see how these are developed. It's such an important element, right? I mean, as we go through our episode by episode discussions, first we're talking about big concepts and isolated ideas, but of course the real challenge, I think, of adaptation, particularly when we're talking about the Silmarillion, and I've said this before, but the main thing is that we're making it into a totally different kind of story than it is in the published text, and to be able to doing this final stage. And it's why I love the work you guys do in the script outline so much, to sort of show how we're going to be taking this and really working it into bringing it all together into this kind of close narrative story where we're looking at character development and showing all these things working together and the sort of the logical links from one event to it, rather than just kind of giving a series of events and kind of the big picture highlights that we so often get in the published Silmarillion, because that's the kind of narrative it is. That kind of historical overview. So that shift down from historical overview to to continuous developing narrative requires a lot of, development and massaging, and that's really cool. But yeah. Anyway, so excellent. So let's do this. But before, quick couple announcements. First of all, just again, another reminder, summer reading program. Our summer camps are coming up. Group registration is open. We really strongly urge people to register for this, not only to be working with your public libraries, your local public library, to perhaps be running a session themselves, but also to be local groups, single-family groups, multi-family groups can kind of get together and do this on their own. Really fun, cool opportunity. We give you all the resources you need to do it on your own, to host a session on your own, have some fun activities to do with the kids as they're reading through these books and everything. So, again, we're doing the 4 books, The Hobbit, Harry Potter, and the Sorcerer's Philosopher's Stone, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Wrinkle in Time. So you can do one or any or all of those 4 camps, all of it totally free, with lots of free resources and with live interactive discussions with our teachers as well. So going to be an awesome time this summer, starting after the 4th of July. So, we're now coming into the last month here in preparation for it. So encourage everybody to sign up. Go to signumuniversity.org/academy. We do have Baymouth coming up on August 18th. We're coming down towards the deadline for the call for papers. So people who want to participate in that, strongly urge you to reach out by email there. Again, go to signumuniversity.org/events, and you'll find the events page for Baymouth, and you can see the link there for the call for papers. I'm also really looking forward. So we're going to have an official, semi-official SilmFilm event at Mythmoot this year. We kind of did a little bit of it last year, but we're gonna do it more this year. So we're gonna do some. We're gonna have a session where we actually write some stuff, and then we're gonna perform it later on. It's gonna be really neat. So lots of really fun SilmFilm stuff going to be happening at Mythmoot while we're all hanging out together this year. So I was excited to see that on the program. All right, so let's get back to the episodes here. So episodes 11 and 12, I started kind of talking some about both of those at the end of last time. Couple things I wanted to touch on in conjunction with these last few episodes. So can we talk about the vision of Feanor a little bit? We didn't really talk about that last time, and I want to make sure we don't miss that because that's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me about what were sort of some of the main things that you guys were really wanted to emphasize when you were thinking about the vision.
Well, it's supposed to convey to the audience that this is a hopeless quest that he's been engaged in.
Right.
And the Doom of Mandos probably clued everybody into that. But up until this point, it's possible to view the story as Feanor's right, and all his naysayers just don't know how great and wonderful he is and powerful.
That's certainly been his line.
Right. So his death scene kind of puts the final nail in that coffin of saying that no, Feanor has been wrong all along. His rebellion was doomed from the start, and Morgoth is not a foe that he or his sons can defeat.
Right.
So we kind of wanted to have that be a pretty strong feeling out of the vision.
Right.
The hopelessness.
The hopelessness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I like the.
And we had.
Go ahead.
And we had to do it in a way that communicated it to the audience, but not to his sons per se.
Right.
Because he certainly is not going to tell them, oh, by the way, I am so important to myself, I'm going to send all 6 of you to die.
Right. I agree. That is one of the most striking elements, I think, of that moment in the story. That just, with the eyes of death, he looks out on Thangarodrim and knows for certainty, with the foretelling of death, that there's no way they can possibly defeat Morgoth. And his response to that is to make his sons re-swear the oath and promise to keep trying what he knows to be impossible. That I think it so clearly shows the madness of Feanor at this point. I mean, I mean, that combination I think is is really important. I love the visuals, the way you guys have done this whole sort of like large crown theme there of the visions, right? Feanor's crown, especially since, of course, we had the and the sort of that climactic, not climactic, that final scene, right? The final visual of Feanor with the crown at the end of season 2.
Yes, exactly. We wanted to make sure that didn't get lost in season 3, so this vision is where that ties in.
Yeah, no, that's great. Love that. And the way that how you use the peaks of Thangorodrim as the sort of transitional point between the crown and the one crown and the other crown, right? Between his crown and the Iron Crown with the 3 Silmarils. I think that's really cool. I think that works really well. Even the suggestion, which I think we should follow up on, that the visually Thangorodrim should kind of look like Morgoth's crown. I mean, like there should be a non-coincidental similarity between the 3 peaks of the Thangorodrim that he raises and the Iron Crown that he's wearing.
Yeah, we can definitely look at the locations and see if any of them look like crowns.
Sort of, or we can shoot them from an angle that makes them look like a crown. We may end up just doing a CGI Thangorodrim. I mean,
CGI matte painting or something like that.
Yeah. I think that we might have to do that, but yeah, I mean, because it logically that even sort of makes sense, right? I mean, because it's not like Morgoth has to just do location scouting, right? I mean, he just makes them. I mean, he's made the mountains, and just as he made his own crown, presumably, and he made his own mountains, as he's making his stronghold. So, that he would make sort of both of them similar, and even in his mind, it's more than just symbolic, right? I mean, the stronghold of Thangorodrim that he rears up is like that's his crown, right? I mean, it's like literally above his head, and the sign of his power and authority, and so it's not even actually like metaphorical. It's almost literally like another crown of his, and the fact that it's enormous, mountainous in size, well, that is still modest compared to Morgoth's own scope and certainly his own self-image. So,
and there probably was a time where he could have made himself fit it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I love that connection and the juxtaposition with the Silmarils and everything. But my favorite touch is that last one, that as the 3 Silmarils and the Iron Crown kind of fade out in his vision, the one like the central Silmaril, I would think it would be the central one probably, sort of drifts up, right, and he sees it up in the air above him and reaches for it but can't touch it. I love that, the way that we get. My favorite element of that is, of course, we know that this is a sign of hope, right? He's being shown a sign of hope because it's an allusion to Eärendil and the star. But of course it's out of his reach. And so what is meant to be what is a foreshadowing of this sign of hope for the world is merely like, to Feanor, he's like Tantalus, right? He can't reach it. So the juxtaposition of those two things, how that, a Silmaril placed as a sign of hope in the sky for everyone, would seem like a kind of best case scenario, unless you're Feanor and just want to keep it to yourself. So like, his own frustration of not being able to have it for himself and never being able to reach it outweighs any, it makes him totally miss the whole hope message associated with that, right? And I think that's both as a way of conveying his perspective and the kind of the dramatic irony involved of the allusion up to Eärendil and Feanor not understanding it and not liking it in as much as he does understand it, right? All of those things I think are really really great. Loved that last thing.
Cool. Glad you liked it.
Yeah, I think that works very, very well.
I also really like that imagery. I'm glad that I like the final note being a hint of the hope. I was kind of hoping we would do something like that we wouldn't end just on the power of Thangaradram, but we would provide an image that for the savvy viewer they would realize that this is pointing to the final end.
Yes.
Which is a hopeful, happy, and ends in victory for the West, but that for maybe but they would be at best ambiguous for the uninformed viewer, and that for Feanor would not be a sign of hope. It would be it would be a source of frustration for him. So and I think the Silmaril in the sky is like perfect. I think you guys nailed it.
Yeah, that's just brilliant. That's brilliant. Love it. His death, the death of Feanor. Let's see, where's the death? I'm scrolling. Where did it go? Did I miss it? I missed it. Where did it go? No, I didn't miss it. Where's his death? He's taking this long to die? No, wait. He's grieving now. Where's his death? It's short. Is this why I missed it? Is it? Oh, it's at the end of that other section? It's just short.
Yeah. One of the things that we had to... Because there had been some discussion of having him burst into flame in the middle of his son saying the oath.
Yeah. Oh, there it is.
The problem is... Would they just... Like, they've never seen that happen before, ever.
Nobody's ever seen that happen before.
Die.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't... there's no way they would just keep on talking over that. Like, they would have to stop.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. Yeah. No, that's something that's good. You're not just going to carry on. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, yes. I absolutely agree with you there. Let's think for a second about the flames. I want to think about the visuals of Feanor's body bursting into flames, because there are a couple. Well, there are a bunch of challenges with this. This is another one of those things which is really awesome when you just say it right in a book, but when you actually have to show it, there are some implications that are tricky.
I was going to say, how do we do this so that the audience doesn't start laughing?
Exactly. It could look funny, right? We have to be careful with that. But here's the other thing.
Spontaneous combustion.
Right. Yeah, exactly. If it's too comical as spontaneous combustion, that's not good. If we make, he just, burst into, red sooty flames or something, it's going to look like the flames of hell consuming him. I mean, there's going to be associations with that we don't want, right? We don't want to associate it with a Judeo-Christian hell. We don't, as you pointed out in the outline, we don't want to associate it with the Balrog flames either. I actually think there's an argument in favor of that to say that, but again, because we don't want to make it look like this is just the delayed action of the Balrog's flaming whips or something, like that they have set a flame in him and he's been holding out against it, and that so it's not that he's killed by the this is the power of the Balrogs finally overwhelming him or something like that. We need to show that the fire comes from him, right? That this is his own fire.
Oh, I hadn't even considered that fact, that we need that it could be confusing visually for once again for sort of the uninformed viewer. They might think that the Balrogs killed him.
Right, exactly. But at the same time, we don't want to make it look like he is merely translated or something. We don't for instance, I could imagine if we just have him dying and then there's a flash of white light and his body is gone, that people is he really dead? Was he taken up by the Valar or something? We want it to be clear that he's dead. And in a sense, it's a bad thing that he's being.
I'm trying to think if we have some kind of visual from before, during the building of of Anor. But I can't think of anything that would connect. Because I think you're right. It's even though this is kind of a unique happening, you'd want to connect it in the reader's memory to maybe something, but I don't know what that something would be unless it's during Morgoth's fight. But it shouldn't even be a Morgoth thing, because it's really not.
No,
I mean,
it's
in terms of
really
it's
a
a Feanor thing.
Exactly. So it seems to me, visually speaking, we have three. So if we're thinking of what are the Feanorian flames, right? We have three options. We've got the sort of forge fires of his own forge that we've seen, where we see him working in fire. But that, I think, visually is not going to be very distinctive. We have the light of the Silmarils, of course, but that's not really his light, so that wouldn't seem to work either. The only other thing we have are the Feanorian lamps. Ruth was just thinking the same thing. We've got the Feanorian lamps, which are blue. If the flames which came and engulfed him are the blue flames that are like the flames in the Feanorian lamps, it would definitely be different. Dave, I'm worried that it's going to look comical, like you were saying. Blue fire kind of looks funny. I'm thinking of like screen
80s
adaptations of Dracula, where they do the blue flame thing, and it always looks funny. Always. I've never seen that not look just dumb on screen when they do the blue flames from Dracula. So I don't know.
I'm thinking about it increasingly. I guess I'm maybe less concerned on second thought, because I think it has to do with sort of the presentation of his death. Like I think there's a way in which this kind of just looks like, say, Darth Vader's funeral pyre, right? Like if he's kind of lying on a bier of some kind, and then he sort of, we do sort of a recognizable passing away moment, and then the flame, he doesn't immediately burst into flames or spread into dust, but kind of the flames kind of, come up slowly, such that, like, subconsciously people might sort of interpret it as somebody's actually setting the flames. I think it can work. And I think the idea of connecting these flames with some very recognizable kind, sort of special flame from earlier in the series, I think that will help a lot too. So it's clearly not ordinary fire.
Right. What are your thoughts on the idea of the blue flames, Dave? You think that would work?
I'm fine with that. I'm not particularly troubled by those. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know that this is a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you first.
I don't know that this is kind of a reach to make it a parallel, but for some reason I flashed on, Saruman's death, and his was wind, right? His was like spirit and wind. I mean, this is kind of in that same theme, and I'm not sure that contributes anything to the conversation.
Right.
Well,
no,
we actually talked about that when we were working this out.
Yeah. Okay.
Because what we do have is that it is a wind comes out of the east and blows his ashes that are left behind.
Ah, got it. Right.
The way that we indicate that he hasn't been translated is that his ashes are left behind.
Right.
As far as avoiding comedy, I think that's going to be that's a job for the actors to make sure that doesn't happen. Because usually the line between comedy and seriousness isn't just what happens, it's how people react to it and how they're emoting at the time. So I mean we've cast, I mean we haven't cast the Sons of Feanor yet, but Richard Armitage I 100% believe can be convincing as I'm dying and it's not funny.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm dying and it's not funny. Yeah, that's
it seems like a absurd thing to have to say, but
try to do a non-comical death, Richard. Come on. No.
Well, if you think about some of the things, and don't do it in slow-mo, because, for example, when Frodo wakes up in the Return of the King film, when Frodo wakes up after he's been rescued from from Mount Doom, and he sees Gandalf, that whole reaction, after you've watched it a couple of times, it invites you to laugh at it.
Right.
Just because it's like it's slowed down to the absurd.
Yeah.
Now, this may be aided by the fact that my cousin, who's on the spectrum, has watched and rewatched that moment over and over and over and over again. He'll just rewind it to the point where he wakes up and watch it, and then rewind it to that point again. That may have helped in my
right to render it absurd in your mind. Yeah.
I just got to say to Phil's point about Nick's point. Phil, hello, Phil. Nick's point. I'm really glad that we did not decide on Weird Al Yankovic for Fëanor. Because now is the time, right?
Right.
That's true. That would not have gone very far towards our goal of not making this.
That would not.
No, that would not.
No,
that would not. Hey, wait. Does that mean we can cast Weird Al Yankovic somewhere else, though?
Does he have an IMDb page?
I'm sure he does. Oh, yeah,
of course he does.
Our requirements are that they be living and have an IMDb page. So if so,
he has to be a bard. Yes. He has to be a minstrel of some kind.
Oh man,
right?
I would almost insist on Weird Al Yankovic being somewhere. That's got to happen. But
make him a dwarf. Make him a dwarf.
Phil Boswell wants to cast him as Tom Bombadil.
Too bad. He doesn't have quite the right build.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. And I can't see. Yeah.
Correct build, play Tom Bombadil, no problem. But
yeah, he's actually got a pretty elvish physique. He's very thin and super pale.
Willowy.
That's true.
That's willowy and a heck of a lot better looking than all of his artwork depicts him as.
Yes.
True.
Yes.
Like in person, he actually looks decent. On his album covers, not so much.
Right. Oh, he's always like the camera angles are deliberately to make him look ridiculous. Yeah.
Yes.
Time to launch a Twitter campaign to get him cast as young Aragorn.
I was thinking Elrond. In the show. In the
also
show.
Excellent.
No. I mean, I love Weird Al as much as anybody, but not Elrond. I don't think.
But young Aragorn, maybe.
No. First of all, he's like.
See what a contribution
60,
I make to the conversation would take us totally off course.
Yeah, exactly.
So back to the flames.
Back to the flames.
I did have a comment earlier.
Good. Yes, let's go back to the flames.
So we will have seen Fëanor holding the Silmarils in his hand, which means the light welling through the skin will have been an image that we've used at some point. We would be able to show light glowing from him before we show the body burst into flames that would tie to that image without being the light of the Silmaril is like setting him on fire.
Right.
If we wanted to avoid blue flames, we could do that because a light through your hand looks much redder because it's going through your skin.
Yes. No, I like that. I mean, the thing that we do have to emphasize in this, Dave, this is where I actually would want to make sure that we didn't have it look like they were setting him on fire. Because again, if we're going to do this, the reason to do it, right? The reason to have him burst into flames at all is in order to show the thing that Tolkien depicts, which is unique among all elf deaths ever recorded, which is that his spirit being, the fiery spirit within him, when it leaves his body, burns the body to ash. So like it is the fieriness of his spirit. He would die cursing, right? Like the cursing of Morgoth that he's doing, I think that I would want to move that. Like you guys had the cursing and then the repetition of the oath. I would want to have them repeating the oath and then him curse Morgoth and die as he's cursing Morgoth. So, he curses Morgoth by something and then curses Morgoth by something. I do think he should curse him 3 times. Not that he has to repeat the same words 3 times. He can curse him in 3 different ways. He can curse him by one thing and another thing and another thing. And then just like, yell basically. I could just see, he's angry. He dies mad. He dies angry, and his spirit his fiery spirit as it emerges from him, sets fire to his spirit. But I love that. that image, Maria, of like the light and the capturing that light, from his hand, the idea of that kind of glowing through his body, and then as it kind of bursts out, I could see there being, a flash of maybe a couple seconds of flame, like the white, it starts with a white light and then like sort of dies into blue flames and then falls into ashes. That I think could work. Tim is talking about seeing the fire kind of start in his eyes and show him being in pain, like the light and the fire that's coming out of him he should be in anger and pain as he dies. That seems to fit to me as well.
Can you think of anything where a figure visibly bursts into flame from the inside and is clearly in pain in doing so?
Is this a supernatural reference?
Maybe. Every ghost ever.
Well, I was thinking more angel possession for the glowing white light. But usually they don't die in pain. But anyway, that's another.
Don't die in pain,
See, I just showed my age. I was going back to oh crap, what's the one about the three sister witches?
The Witches of Eastwick.
The three sisters in San Francisco. Charmed. Yeah, I was thinking Charmed. Yeah, there were plenty of people that burned up from the inside on that show.
When they're ill-advisedly rebooting.
Are they really? Oh God! What is with rebooting? Yeah. What is the thing? Nobody has imagination anymore.
We don't have to do a podcast on that, do we?
No.
Yeah, no one ever has any original ideas. They just reboot existing things.
Really? No kidding. Jeez.
Except for us, no one's done this before.
Exactly.
That's true.
Exactly.
That's true.
Okay. Well, good. I think that can all, and this is all going to add to the. Thinking of the shock of Feanor's sons, right? Shocked that he's dead. Like, I can't believe he's actually dead. I mean, and I like how this scene begins with somebody trying to heal him, right? Because they all assume, like, yeah, he got beat up. He's in a bad way. But it's not like you could just kill Feanor. It's not like Feanor's just going to die, right? And then, so it's not just the fact that he's so like they're just like standing there staring at his body as it, bursts into flame and then collapses into ash. Which gets blown away, and that that would be I actually think should be a really powerful scene, coming as it does in the middle of episode 11 out of 13 of season 3. I kind of love that. And all right, okay, cool. I wanted to review the visuals there and go through that. By the way, I really like Dairon's music and the spiders. How all of that works visually. Again, how are we thinking of representing? Are we going to be visually representing light surrounding him? So as he's singing of light. And making his music, we have him surrounded by like a globe of light that the spiders can't get in. Is that how we're thinking of doing that?
I would think that what might be a little bit easier is if the light is coming off him in waves that are projected towards the spiders.
Okay.
Because this way he's able to do more than just protect his own self.
Protect himself. Yes. Okay. And we can have we can definitely show a sort of frontier, right? As the light from his song comes out. I mean, I have to be a little bit careful not to over physicalize it, right? But of course the awkwardness here is that the webs of the spiders are still dark. These are the children of Ungoliant, right? So their webs are unlight, and their relationship with light is, they eat it, right? So they're not just automatically repelled by light.
In this case, I think the light is more a visual representation of his own. Like when you play video games, and like for example, when you play Lotro and there's magical effects.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, you're seeing them on the screen, but they're like, if you were actually there and that was actually happening, you wouldn't actually see anything.
Right.
There's kind of like this weird like given that nobody really thinks about, but it's kind of there, that a lot of these effects are just so that you can see something.
Well, it's one of the challenges, right? I mean, one of the challenges of visual adaptation of especially Tolkien's magic, which is so often non-visual in its effect. Yeah. Just to have him singing and them not attacking him because he's singing, right? And not have any visual, as you say, any visual representation of that, of the effect of his magic would be hard. I think that would look strange. Like, just for some reason they're choosing not to attack him, right? Which is not,
I don't know. If we cast Weird Al as Dairon, then maybe he's repelling them with the power of polka.
Thank you.
Uh-oh, I think I have another Bob way going on here. Sorry, guys.
And here's a reference for you, Corey. Yeah. And the reason for that is because polka never dies.
Polka never dies. Exactly. Polka never dies. It just goes off wandering the world, looking for Luthien, basically. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Tim Fisher reminds us that, of course, the musical score will convey a lot of this, right? I mean, the power of Dairon's music is something that that is going to rely very heavily on the musical score, which I think would be rendered all the more effective by having it be primarily polka based. So that all makes perfect sense. Okay.
Don't you dare, Phil.
That's right. And we're not, just to clarify, we are not serious about that, Phil. Not that I think that Phil would take that seriously. But anyway, yeah. So, and no, Phil, there is no plans to include a zombie Tyrannosaurus Rex among the beasts of ivory and horn. So, anyway, moving on. Sorry, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, we're now making Dresden Files references. Jim Butcher's Dresden Files is the polka thing, and polka will never die, and just.
And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, shame on you.
Shame on you. Yeah.
I know, really.
What? You should have read them, but one can forgive you for having lost your enthusiasm at this point.
No way, man. Speaking of which,
doing the long wait for the next one.
Yeah, Peace Talks is being rather delayed, but the new volume of collected short stories just came out.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet.
Me neither.
And for the Lotro players among us, I have a lore master named Dresden who's got a kinship called Stars and Stones and a bog lurker named Butters.
That's right.
Fantastic. All right.
That's to go with Polka Never Dies.
The idea that Butters is a bog lurker.
I know.
That's right.
So, in the interest of having any time to do sets today,
we're totally fine. So, I only have one more thing that I wanted to talk about on episode 11, and that is, I wanted to review where the Valar, the Valar's reasons. There it is. The reasons for not intervening militarily. During the Council of the Valar, because some of these I like and some of these I don't. Obviously the time is not yet right is one that's like the least satisfying one, but also kind of the obviously most important one, really, despite or because the fact that it's not satisfying, but that I think has to be really prominent. The awakening of the second children, that's also a very, very central argument, right? That the War of the Powers, a second War of the Powers here, could destroy the second children before they have a chance to even awaken, or as they're awakening. And that's of course then done in conjunction with the Valar can't defeat him without destroying, possibly all of Arda, maybe at least a continent. I love and I would want to lay great stress on the free will argument, respecting the free will of the Noldor who demand to fight Melkor without aid, that they have chosen to do this. Yes, now, like, the counter argument to that, which I think would, like, Yavanna would probably lead, would be, but Melkor is messing with a lot of things that did not choose to fight him, right? Why should we abandon all of Middle-earth, and leave Melkor to wreak havoc upon all of Middle-earth just because the Noldor want to fight him, right? That doesn't really that certainly would not make sense to Yavanna. But certainly the idea of not intervening, not coming and helping the Noldor, not out of like pettiness or spite against the Noldor, but in order to respect their free will. I really like. I mean, I think that element should definitely be present, though I don't think that that's enough on its own to justify them not just coming and mopping up, taking Melkor back into custody, essentially, since he escaped from them and defied them. One of the arguments I was less comfortable with, it's true, and it might be worth having them express it so that we get this idea out there, is the one about Morgoth using himself up and weakening himself. The problem here, so again, we're not going to be talking about this. Is a golden opportunity to drop that idea into exposition. So I agree that it would be kind of nice to mention that there. The thing that I would want to be cautious of, though, it's not like the Valar need that. Like, they can take him, right? They
just
can,
not without massive collateral damage.
Right, exactly. So if we do have them, raising this argument and talking about Morgoth weakening himself, we just need to make sure that they are not making it sound like, we're worried that we might not win if we attack him now. We need to wait until he's weaker. Like they took him before, they could take him again. But it might hurt the world less if they do it when he's weaker. But see, even there, like, okay, so let's let him destroy the world for a long time, and then the world will be destroyed less when we. I mean, that's kind of tricky. So yeah,
right.
we do need to make sure that it's not out of weakness, essentially, that they're worried about his power.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's okay for them to express that idea, but not to use it as a reason to delay.
Right. Exactly. Because I don't think it would be a reason, not in itself, as a reason to delay.
Like, if they're going to delay anyway,
right.
Added bonus, he'll be weaker when we do fight him.
Yeah, and they could even bring it up in that somebody like Varda could bring it up in that context, right? To say, when they say they're not going to attack right away, then she can say, and as time goes by, he shall be weaker and weaker, as he continues to disperse himself. So, yeah.
Well, essentially, the main reason why they don't do it is because, like, in order the amount of power they'd have to bring to bear on it, they've got at least 3 people with them who can create an extinction level event.
Yes, sir. I just love the application of that phrase in a Silmarillion context. Yes. I'm with you.
Yeah. Well, so, if Olmo, Aule, or Manwë go to town on this guy, or Varda, who can probably bring, meteors down from the sky. As a matter of fact, I think that we did have her doing that in the Battle of the War of the Powers. So, like, that ability exists. And in order to take Melkor and all the forces he's gathered to himself down at this point, they would kind of have to do that. Whereas when they come in the War of Wrath, they're mostly dealing with his mortal army.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, I agreed. I mean, it makes sense that they don't, especially now. Back in the old days, at the end of season 1, it was only the elves, and the elves were, localized only in the, they were out at Cuiviénen, and so they could set a guard on them and have more or less free reign. Though again, Yavanna would disagree that there was nobody else to be hurt. However, yeah, it's a totally different situation now, and they don't want to. The collateral damage is the primary argument. against them attacking Melkor right now. And and in that context, the awakening of the second children needs to be mentioned. And then again, Varda can say, like, the time will come when the hour is right, as Morgoth weakens himself over the years. That makes perfectly good sense. Now, Hakon brings up, and he's right to say, we need to make sure that the Silmarils get talked about. Of course, it's not about not intervening, but we need to make sure that that's a really important context for the people who are arguing. I would think, like Tolkas, for instance, would be strong in the arguments in favor of intervening, right? Like, this whole thing could begin with people like Tolkas and probably Orome saying, we need to go, it's time for it. We know where he is, right? We tried to catch him and he escaped. We know where he is now. We're going to go get him, right? That's what happens next, obviously. Tolkas can be thinking of that in relatively simple terms like that. And then somebody, Aule, maybe? Or maybe even somebody like Vana or somebody like that should be expressing, like, and the Silmarils, right? The light of the trees now lives only in the Silmarils. Surely we must recover those, right? I'm thinking Vana.
I think that if she does say that, somebody could say that are they ours to recover at our will?
Right.
Because they're kind of not. Yes, they do. Like, the light originates from them, obviously.
Right.
But the reason why they asked Feanor in the first place was because they aren't theirs to just take.
Right. Well,
and so if somebody is talking about recovering the Silmarils, then somebody else is going to have to bring that up.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because here's Feanor saying you can't trust the Valar because they want the Silmarils for themselves, right? And so we don't want to show that his words are totally true, but I think it's absolutely fine for us to show that his words have some justification, right? That he's not, it's not totally out of nowhere.
They absolutely do want them. Right. There's no question they want them. It's just a question of whether they feel like it's right to take them. Is the issue.
Right. Exactly. But they're definitely a high on the list of why we should intervene now and go and recover more, Melkor, reincarcerate Melkor. And I was suggesting Vana for that role because if I'm remembering correctly, in the earlier Silmarillion, like in the 1937 Quenta, Vana is the one who is like, she's the one who kind of like flips out at the darkening of Valinor. She's the one who isn't she the one who wastes it all? Like the extra light, like the pools of light, Ungoliant doesn't drink them all at first, and she like dumps them on the mound in order to try to recuperate the trees, and everyone's like, stop, what are you doing? Anyway, so she like kind of screws it up. But the point is, she's the one who is like super focused and obsessed about trying to restore the trees and everything. So we're not going to put her in that role. Even Tolkien in later revisions toned that down a very great deal, but just sort of recalling that she was placed in that role, and we don't give her many roles, that would seem to be an opportunity. But
and she's Yavanna's sister, so if Yavanna's concerned about the trees, her desire to save the trees kind of makes it a family thing. Right,
exactly. Whereas Yavanna, in this debate, the whether or not to reinvade Middle-earth debate, she's going to be anti, right? Because she's thinking about the living creatures of Middle-earth. Whereas Vana being, would also be kind of reflecting the other side of that, right? She'd be focused on the trees and the light of the trees, with which Yavanna would agree. But Vana does not have the same attachment as Yavanna does to the living creatures of Middle-earth. So it would be a way of kind of giving the Yavanna perspective on both sides, essentially, without having Yavanna just look wishy-washy. Okay, cool, good. That's it. That's what I wanted to emphasize there. So I'm good on episode 11. We talked about the other stuff before. we didn't talk about the Aurora Borealis, but I'm fine with the Aurora Borealis. The point of it is that it's granting hope and light and guidance to the sort of just making things easier for the Noldor.
It's lighting, which is a bonus in this season, but it's also hope, and you have not been abandoned completely. Someone is still thinking about you and caring about you from a distance. In a not entirely practical way.
Yeah.
They're putting their bow in the sky, as it were.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I like that. Okay, cool. Good. All right, I'm good with episode 11. Any last thoughts on episode 11 from anybody else? Okay, episode 12. Good. Episode 12, then. I only have a few things from episode 12. The planning of the parley. I know this was one of the things that you guys were thinking about. In specific, one of the questions you guys had mentioned before was, how duplicitous do we want to make the Sons of Feanor as they go in?
Yes, there was some debate on the board back and forth as to where we wanted them to start. Because we know where we want them to end up as characters.
Right.
Like Curfin being duplicitous, so will surprise no one 5 seasons from now.
Right.
But now where do we want them to begin in their war with Morgoth?
Well, I mean, I don't really see this as... I mean, I guess technically there's a little duplicity involved in the sense that they're like, you know, they come with more people than they say they're going to bring, so that's technically duplicitous. But it's not like there's betrayal or underhanded dealing here exactly, right? I mean, there's...
Well, there could be. I mean, we could set up in a whole elaborate ambush.
Right. Ambush and counter-ambush.
Right. Where they could have said all sorts of things that aren't true and then do something completely different. You know, like, we have opportunities here to make it more explicitly duplicitous, if that's desired. So
I mean, the book makes it pretty clear that, because basically what it says is that Maedhros convinced his brothers to feign to treat with Morgoth.
Yes.
So to pretend that they were going to negotiate with him, which implies that they are not actually going to negotiate.
Right. And my thought on that has always been simply that he does not believe that there's any treating going on, right? So he's pretending to go along with it, knowing that it's not going to happen. You know, I mean, at least that's how I've always pictured that going down. Not that Maedhros is necessarily saying, and now it is time for a devious stratagem by which we lure them into, like, he's not doing any luring, right?
He's expecting it to be a double cross.
Exactly. He's expecting a double cross all along, and is planning to double cross the double cross, or at least to protect himself against the double cross, by doing things that, by preparing for this in a way that, you know, his enemy doesn't expect. So again, yes, that's technically duplicitous, but it's not like he's the one, you know, undertaking a devious plan. Exactly. He's just being not stupid, basically, in his preparations.
I personally wanted to avoid any chopping off the head of the mouth of Sauron kind of scene.
Yes.
Where there was something that would have been clearly out of bounds.
Yes.
But other people were asking that there be clear indication that you can't trust the Sons of Feanor in how they act in this scene.
Right. I agree. Well, I guess my thought about that is, yes, you can't trust the Sons of Feanor generally. I think the kinslaying has already kind of laid the foundations for that, but and not to mention the burning of the ships. By now, it's fairly clear that you can't trust the Sons of Feanor, and we'll have plenty of opportunities to reinforce that point of view later on. But here, because we're talking about dealing with Morgoth and Sauron, it's not really about trust. I mean, like, so what? They're gonna... In fact, it would be weird, frankly, if they were all, like, standing on their honor and everything now, again, you know, in going into this obvious trap that Morgoth is setting for them. That would just seem kind of weird. Like, we're willing to slay our kin, we're willing to betray Fingolfin and burn the ships, but when it comes to, engaging in an obviously ill-intentioned trap by Morgoth, we're going to scrupulously, make sure our word is our bond. Like, that just doesn't even make much sense, actually, in those circumstances. If we're going to show them turning over a new leaf and being honorable to their word and totally trustworthy, would be turning over a new leaf at this point. It's establishing a new thing, not holding to an old. Now would not be the time to do it, right? It wouldn't even make any sense for them to want to at this point.
And yet, at the end of the day, what's really interesting is that Sauron is more follows the letter of the deal more closely than they do.
Well, no, he doesn't, because he
brings no Balrogs. He brings 0 Balrogs.
But he double crosses them by I mean, yes, he follows that, but he doesn't bring a Silmaril. He doesn't offer a Silmaril. He says that he would give them a Silmaril, and he doesn't. So he is betraying the whole point of the core of it, while like getting around the. No, but I like the fact how you guys have Sauron coming and accusing, well, Thuringwetho on behalf of Sauron coming and accusing the Feanorians of bad faith. That I really like, because of course that's technically true, even though Maedhros was less duplicitous in the end than Sauron. And Marie, I do appreciate the point. We want to make Maedhros look good here, right? His actions should be noble.
We want people to want him rescued.
Yes. And we do need to establish, as we've already begun establishing, that Maedhros is like the good egg among the Feanorians, right? We've already laid the groundwork for that. We started laying the groundwork for that in his friendship with Fingon. For a second I thought I said the wrong name, but I didn't. Yes, with his friendship with Fingon, we you're talking about the Silmarillion when like you think you made a mistake, mistook one F name for another, and then you realized you accidentally didn't. So yes, we started that with his friendship with Fingon, and then of course with his standing aside at the burning of the ships. So his distance from that kind of the treachery and duplicity, which has become now, though again, it's not just about duplicity in the sense of we have no honor of any kind and we just enjoy stabbing people in the back. The whole point of both the kinslaying and the burning of the ships is the objective is so important it outweighs everything else, right? We are willing to sacrifice anything. Feanor is willing to sacrifice anything for the sake of his goal, recovering the Silmarils. All right, so that's more important than anybody else.
Keeping their word too.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, their oath. Exactly. So with Maedhros, what we're showing with him, the way that he fits into that system then is that he already, as I said, in his friendship with Fingon, and then even more in his later decision, he's showing he's not willing to follow the goal at that cost, right? It's not that he doesn't follow the goal. It's not that he's not generally on board with warring against Melkor and recovering the Silmarils. He is on board with that. The main thing that he differs with his father about is he's not willing to do that at any cost.
Not yet anyway.
Not yet anyway. There are things that he will not do in order to pursue that goal. Showing him willing, the way that he goes into this parley sort of self-sacrificially, anyway, knowing the danger, knowing the likelihood that he's going to be double-crossed and willing to put himself for the sake of the possibility of getting a Silmaril, that I think is kind of a good move, right? Because in a sense, that's a sort of an un-Feanorian thing to do, right? Feanor probably would have gone, but he would have done it for a different reason and in a different attitude than Maedhros is going to. So yeah, I like that. So I would say he doesn't have to. He will come with more strength. I like the idea of there being him kind of bringing some concealed troops that he that he attempts to conceal, which is just he's bringing backup because he believes he's going to be double crossed, which he is. And then Sauron double crosses him. So. And I did like how that worked with the trolls and the song contest. Let's talk about the song contest for a second. Sauron singing. The idea of Sauron kind of singing in harmony with himself is kind of awesome in the sense of him like doing something that is like musically really ornate and intricate. But I'm not sure about the harmony though. Because remember, harmony is the thing that the music of Morgoth doesn't have. I'm not saying that no evil music can ever be harmonious. It is interesting that he's harmonizing with himself, so that it's still a solo, but it's a solo that's also like I am making my own harmony is kind of I kind of like it. I guess I'm not 100% convinced, but
okay. So this was Hakon's idea.
Yeah.
He was the one who came up with that, and since this, I mean, I would agree with you that Morgoth couldn't do something like this right now,
right,
because he just doesn't have it in him to create that kind of music.
right.
But Sauron, we're depicting in a very gradual, slow slide into evil, where he's
Yes.
not 100% fallen yet. He can still change his shape. He still has powers of music. Like he has some of like the good guy abilities at his disposal because he's not 100%.
He's not completely.
Fallen.
He's not over yet. Yeah.
Like not completely. I mean, he's obviously bad, but not.
Yeah.
Irredeemable. He's not irredeemably bad yet.
Yep. I agree. Establishing a distinction between Sauron and Morgoth in that way does make sense to me. Okay. No, I like it. And the way in which we are showing this provides us an interesting opportunity, this sort of paralysis, the imprisonment of Maedhros by his song. It gives us an interesting opportunity to show a physical effect of his song without having to do a light show, right? So I kind of like that. Is Maedhros going to sing?
We were not thinking so, no.
Okay.
I think that if he did, it would kind of distract from... Like, I think he's too much in shock.
Right.
And Sauron sets him up in a way so that he watches his guys getting murdered.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I suppose he could try to start and then his voice just tapers out pretty quickly. I mean, we could have him attempt to fight back, but obviously it's Finrod who's going to have the song duel with Sauron, so we don't want to let Maedhros have too much here.
Right. Well, right. Yes. I'm just thinking of not exactly just setting that up, but and I agree this would not be the epic duel that we're going to get between Finrod and Sauron. I'm just like it might be kind of cool to establish that that's a thing, that like when in this situation and like Sauron is using his music to using his song to assert his will over Maedhros, to sort of just show that Maedhros, like the response to that, like what you do when that happens is to, sing your own song in order to reassert your will.
Although it's totally believable, but Maedhros doesn't know that that's what he's supposed to do.
Right.
Also.
Right.
You could try. I mean, it's an issue of teaching the audience these things.
Exactly.
More so
that's
than figuring out whether or not
I'm
Maedhros knows.
Because, are we going to get any other opportunities? I think this is the last confrontation with Sauron before Finrod, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think Sauron currently has any other roles in the story until we get to the Luthien story, unless we want to give him one.
Which we probably will. I mean, obviously, Sauron... Yeah, Sauron was basically a Baron and Luthien character, right? Originally, so we're gonna... I assume we're going to be inserting him in various other places.
Right. I mean, he's going to get that tower in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's against Oradreth, I guess, is holding the tower when that happens.
Yeah.
Is that the case?
Yeah.
So we have the opportunity for Sauron versus Oradreth.
Right. To sort of begin to establish that. Okay.
Also, yeah, well, that's true. Also, I think that even if this was the only time that this was done, and Myverse didn't utter a single note, that's still enough setup for when Finrod and Sauron have their epic rap battle of destiny.
Right.
That like the audience will understand what's going on because we've already kind of set this up.
Right. This just one-on-one and the assertion of will and power through song.
Right.
Yes.
And in fact, we kind of have to see it working before we can understand what it is that Finrod's defending against. Too.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. That's fine. That's fine. All right, that's all I had on that. Anybody else had anything they wanted to ask or talk about concerning the parley or Sauron or any of those things?
I'm good.
No, it looks solid and well executed to me.
Cool. One of the things that I've been really enjoying is as we've been doing the War of the Ring in the Mythgard Academy over the last few weeks, I had forgotten when we were talking about this before, actually, that in the early drafts, the part of the mouth of Sauron in the Lord of the Rings was played by Sauron himself. Like originally, this was a confrontation. Like Sauron comes out, and Gandalf confronts Sauron in that debate. So that moment is actually a confrontation between Gandalf and Sauron directly, and then Sauron's part is, then Sauron doesn't come out and his part is played by, originally it's the Witch King specially resurrected for this purpose. That is to say, like, he chose to not have the Witch King die at the Battle of Pelennor Field specifically so that he could serve as the spokesperson there in the parley. Which seems like a sad reason to deprive Eowyn of her moment. But anyway, I just like the fact that Sauron was originally the mouth of Sauron. So, having Sauron come out and be the spokesperson here for Melkor, not only do we have the sort of the obvious parallel with the mouth of Sauron and Sauron himself having served earlier as the mouth of Morgoth, but the way that it recapitulates, like Sauron actually coming out and talking with him, like he's actually in an earlier draft performed this role before. So it's kind of fun. Okay. Two other issues I had that I wanted to talk about in episode 12. One each for the Doriath plotline and the Helcaraxid plotline. Let me bring up the girdle thing first, mostly because here I am. Right on this on my screen, I already have the section on the making of the girdle. My only suggestion about that, I love your description of the girdle. How you're not having the girdle be white light, but waves of twilight shadow and grayness, and like this sort of heat shimmer effect of hazy distortion. I agree. We want to make it striking. We want to make it visible. We want to be able to show that effect. But not having it be like white light, I think, is a really clever idea. I really like that. It's going to be a little bit challenging to have like the dark shadow of the spiders be driven back by the like gray shadow of the girdle. White light is an obvious go-to here, right? To contrast with the blackness and the shadow and the unlight of the spiders. So having it be this sort of twilight shadow and grayness, as you guys are describing it, is kind of a bold move visually, but I like it. I think that could work really well. So I think that's really good. My suggestion, just a little visual suggestion that I had, is Melian coming out. I would like to have Melian be, so you guys had Melian coming out onto a balcony of some sort, overseeing this. I would love to have her come in at the point of battle. So here's kind of how I'm picturing it. The spiders, no one's able to do anything with the spiders, right? Dairon's able to hold them back a little bit, but no one's been able to really hurt the spiders, and they're making their inexorable way into Menegroth, right? They've come in through the gates. There's this inner portcullis that you guys have, which I kind of like. So, and it looks like they're going to get through this portcullis at any second. And Dairon is there. So here's the scene as I was imagining it, right? We've got what looks like the final peril of the portcullis, and they don't know how to stop the spiders. Dairon is there, and he is playing and singing. I'm imagining then Luthien comes and stands next to him, and she also sings. And the light, the sort of the visual effects of their song is maybe pushes the spiders back from the portcullis, not far, but a little bit back, as they're, but what we're seeing is them all kind of pushing against it and ready to come. Like, it's obvious it's not defeating them, it's not driving them away, it's just pushing them back, and they're ready to come through. And then Melian walks up behind them, and she lifts the portcullis, and so the portcullis comes up. So the spiders are just right there. So there's Dairon and Luthien standing in the wall of spiders, ready to just pile in, and nothing in between them. And Melian walks straight down the middle towards them, and she begins singing. So, and the effect of her song initially is just looks like a sort of an upgrade from, it's almost as if she's joining her music to Dairon and Luthien's music. And initially it looks like it has a similar effect, but of course it has a much more profound effect as she walks. She just walks straight out towards the spiders, and her song grows, and then we see the girdle come out from her and just blast the spiders back and destroy their webs, and they scatter and run, and the girdle is established. The reason I wanted to do, I was thinking of it that way, is not only just I kind of like the visuals of that. But I really like the idea of her joining her music to the music of Dairon and Luthien, in that, when Melian is not like an intervention from outside. In a sense, she is, of course, because of course she's one of the Maya, but she has joined herself to the elves, right? And the idea that her song and the elves' song are interweaving and are similar and interwoven, especially, of course, with Luthien she is the interweaving, right, of the Maya and the elves. So I kind of wanted to visually represent that they're kind of coming together. But anyway, what do you guys think of that?
Well, it certainly helps explain why she didn't just do that in the first place. Because that was one of my main concerns, is that Melian could have done this if Melian could have done this at any time all by herself. Why didn't she just do that?
Right.
I guess if we have her join them at the point of conflict, and one thing that we could do with this that will kind of bookend stuff that was happening earlier. At the very, very beginning of this plot line, we had Melian and Shelob make long distance metaphorical eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
Right at the introduction. If Shelob is right front and center at that portcullis.
Yes.
And Melian looks right at her before she starts to sing. It will also help tie that all in together.
Yes. I agree. I agree with that. A couple things that I would say with the question of why doesn't she do it sooner, which is an excellent question, of course.
Well, it's a question. It's a problem that we created. So. Well,
yes, it is. But right. But it's an important question to consider. Is my point. Couple things there. First of all, I would want to minimize the number of elvish casualties inside Menegroth. For this reason, because that she would wait is explicable until we get to the if she's just sitting back and doing nothing while watching the people die, that's a problem, right? That becomes an active problem. The spiders, when they were fighting up above ground, the spiders took them by surprise, right? So we can have elves dying up there and Dairon leading because like she doesn't even know that they're coming, right? So that she hasn't intervened yet at that point, no one would think that she would. Once the spiders are besieging them at the gates and at the portcullis, if a bunch of elves die there, then we have then she has some culpability, right, for their deaths if she could have done something and she didn't. So that's one way I think to kind of handle, like she doesn't have any intention of letting the spiders overrun Menegroth. One of the things that I think we could sort of, I don't know if we need to establish this, like if we need people to actually say this at some point or something. I don't know that we do, but essentially what I'm thinking is that as far as the reason she doesn't do it sooner is that she doesn't know at first that it's necessary. Like they are assessing, like they're figuring out how strong the spiders are. They don't know anything about these creatures. Even the fact that these are the children of Ungoliant, this is something that Melian would be essentially diagnosing as they're attacking, right? So
you know what?
Go ahead.
I may have a solution, which I'm totally cutting you off, and I apologize.
Okay. No.
What if she had wanted to avoid cutting Doriath off from the rest of the world?
Yes, the girl of
where you were going.
Sort of, yeah, sort of. I mean, again, the first very practical, simple thing is she wouldn't know instantly. How would she? Why would she know instantly that kind of a radical solution was necessary, right? They don't know anything about these creatures. She, like, all of a sudden, the elves have been driven back. What does she know about it? Right? Like, oh, so there are these like monstrous spider creatures. Oh, really? Spider creatures? Are they? I wonder if they're, and then, so then she's going to figure out like, oh, okay, right. I'm seeing, like I see the unlight webs, right? Okay. So these are obviously the offspring of Ungoliant. I'm now learning because we've never met them before. So I wonder what we can do about them. And then, so her, it's not that she's just, I could have done the girdle anytime and I'm just waiting. Like she does it when she figures out that that's what's required. But Nick, I was thinking of going in a similar kind of direction to what you were saying. That is, the girdle is a kind of a nuclear option, right? I mean, it's a big deal that Doriath gets isolated.
Seems excessive.
Yes, and here's the other thing that a question that I would ask. This isn't something that gets mentioned in the story. I'm not trying to argue that there is any indication that Tolkien expresses this. But would we want to make there be a cost for the girdle? Not just in the sense of the cost of isolating Doriath, but a cost to Melian. I want to make sure that we don't make her power look infinite.
You're saying she has to have like gray streaks in her hair after this?
Well, more than cosmetic. More than cosmetic. I mean, basically, especially keep in mind, if we want to show that the power that Morgoth is asserting comes at a cost to him, right? I would think that not only establishing, but indefinitely maintaining the girdle would have a cost to Melian.
I had kind of intended to do that, and you guys told me you didn't want us to do that on the grounds that she shouldn't be tired thereafter. Like,
not tired.
They shouldn't be, well, no, but they shouldn't be. That it's not the same as what Morgoth is doing.
It's not the same. It's not the same, but here's the
painted yourself into a corner, Corey.
No, because see, here's the other thing. I'm not painting myself in a corner, Dave. I am solving a problem later, right? Because here's the problem later, which is a problem in the Silmarillion, right? Why does she leave? oh, an army is assaulting Doriath. Thingol's dead. I'm really sad that my husband's dead, but you know what I'm going to do? Leave my people and I'm just going to talk to Maglor and be like, so y'all are on your own now and you're pretty much screwed. So I'm going back to Valinor. Bye. And she drops the girdle and leaves, right? Again, it works in the kind of story that the published Silmarillion is in. With having had Melian as a character for years, how would we carry that off at that point? Why would she? How would it not look like a failure or even a betrayal for Melian to just waltz off and say, I'm going to choose to leave Doriath open to its enemies right now, and I don't care. Bye. That's going to be hard to do. So that's actually the end towards which I'm thinking right now. I agree with Nick, according to your testimony, myself, which I perfectly believe, that we want to make sure it doesn't look like Morgoth. It's not the same thing. And yet, I think that there does need to be a cost. There needs to be she can't just be an infinite well of power. We don't want to make her look like an equal and opposite pole to Morgoth here, And Hakan says it's not about losing energy, but she's locked to the area. Yes, but not only locked to the area, Hakan. I'm thinking I want to make the death of Thingol have a direct causal link to the dropping of the girdle. This is why it is kind of coming from my vague thoughts about her joining her song to the elves, to Dairon and Luthien's song. It's hard because Thingol's not there, so having it attached to Thingol's lifespan. I'm thinking of it more being attached to her family because, because Luthien's had she's in her post-death experience at that point. It's a little complicated. But anyway, point is, if she could be anchoring the girdle in a sense to Thingol and, to the, I mean, it would have to be to Thingol. If it's going to be Thingol's death, that's going to lead to it.
So you want us to show,
go ahead, Marie.
Sorry, you want us to show an effect on Thingol when the girdle goes up? We want to show Thingol, feel it happen? Or something.
It's awkward doing this without him there. I mean,
Wait.
Yeah.
What if she's singing the girdle up?
Yeah.
And in the midst of the fight that he's having, he can hear her.
He hears the
even
song.
If it's fine, and he joins. He stops what he's doing.
Yes.
He stops fighting, and he joins in with her.
Yes. Yeah. Now, the risk there is that we make the Girdle of Melian look like a team effort, which once he dies, she can't keep up on her own, which is not exactly right. But if that's the impression people get, I don't hate that totally. I mean, we could do worse than to convey that, I think. Because certainly, I mean, the reason that she leaves is that she tied herself to Thingol, right? Or rather, the only reason she had bound herself to Middle-earth was because of her marriage with Thingol. So when Thingol is gone, her connection to Doriath, her connection to Middle-earth is broken. But yeah, Hakan says her power is her love for the Sindar and Doriath, and Thingol is central to that. Yes. Maybe we can tie this to Thingol explicitly. Now, Nick, again, I like the idea of Thingol joining his song to it. I think we can do that, especially since we already had him in the army on the outskirts there. I like that happening, but I'm thinking. Maybe if there's some... Who else is there? Who else is in Menegroth? Melian, Dairon, Luthien, anybody else? Anybody else you can talk to?
Beleg's there.
Beleg's there?
Beleg is there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then maybe it's
Beleg.
maybe she could have Beleg to talk to. Maybe Beleg expresses to her. So as she's watching the spider's inexorable attempts to break through and realize they're going to get through, Beleg also will say, could remind her that like Thingol and his army are returning and the spiders are going to surely destroy them above ground. So that we see she is motivated not only just by the protection of Menegroth, not just by the desire to defeat the spiders, but we have this link to, she can make a speech about, she has bound herself to this land because of her love of Thingol and her love of Thingol and the Sindar, for Thingol and for Luthien, and for all of them.
In the song.
Right, she could have lyrics in which she talks about that. Something like that.
And if we subtitle them, then that's fine. We can make that work.
Yeah. And we'll have time later on for her to explain some of this, right? She can say in future seasons somewhere that, like, the girdle, the power of the girdle can only last as long as we can have some exposition in a conversation maybe between Galadriel and Melian later on, to have her explain how that works. I just want to make sure that we're setting that up, because again, I think the departure of Melian is going to be a serious problem for us if we don't, and this seems like an opportunity to kind of set the stage for that, basically.
Right. We need to show that she doesn't have the choice to stay and remain queen.
Yes, that's exactly what we need to do.
Yeah, that it's just the natural consequence of the choices she made previously, that she now has to exit stage right for reasons.
Exactly.
And I do, it's interesting because we're kind of building this construct where, you could say of the girdle that it is not built on fear of the enemy, but on love.
Yes.
As corny as that is. But,
right. No, exactly. And that is, yes. No, exactly. That I think works. Yes. The day will come that my bond to this land is broken, and then the song of the girdle shall cease. Yeah, that's a good line. I like that. That'll work. She can. That's exactly the kind of thing she could say to Galadriel during their, one of their tutorial sessions later on. But okay, yeah. Like I said, I just want to
maintain an unaging paradisical kingdom. Step one.
Right, exactly. But she knows there's a limit to it. Right, it's not going to last forever. It can't last forever, and that when okay, notes towards that future conversation with Galadriel as well. Melian could talk about the time when she is going to diminish and pass into the west, essentially, right? Because I think that's what, like, her, when the girdle fades, her, she is going to be, again, there need to be consequences, right? This is not just something that she kind of, the girdle can't just be something that she could pull out at any time that she wants to, maintain for as long as she wants, and then, be unaffected by afterwards. If it's all just purely elective and effortless on her part. She's not one of the children of Iluvatar, but the idea of her, like, basically putting herself in a place where she has to, like, go into retreat in Valinor in order to recover her strength. That when the girdle is, when the bond is broken and the girdle fades, that she couldn't do it again. There is no option for her to throw up a second girdle at that point.
It's not entirely unlike what happens to Sauron after the destruction.
I was thinking the same exact thing. Yeah. Now, I mean, of course,
it's not wholly unlike it.
It's not wholly unlike it. It's not the same, but yeah, it's especially since, again, what happens to Sauron is a consequence of him pulling a Morgoth, right, and putting his own power into the Ring of Power, so that when it's taken from him, he is diminished. But the main thing, Nick, the main similarity that I see is the idea of, like, just as Sauron recuperates over time, so could she, essentially. Yeah. Marielle says we could think about it as Sauron's actions being like a corrupt version of Melion's actions. They both have consequences, but Sauron's are, because it's as much about the motivations as about the mechanism there. So, yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'm not thinking, we don't want Melian, when she's doing this, to look like Green Galadriel in the Hobbit movies. We don't want to be doing anything like that to show that, this is like her, obviously we want to avoid anything like that. I don't want to make her hair turn gray. We don't have to, nothing like that. But, we do need to, because while the girdle is in place, her power is undiminished, right? The point is not that she is now lesser because she has put forth this power, but rather by pouring so much of her power into the girdle, when her bond to the land is broken and the girdle falls, she will be diminished. At that point, she will be diminished. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Last point. Episode 12. Helcaraxa. Galadriel and Fingolfin. I want to iron this out a little bit more. So you guys have this, not exactly a power struggle, but you guys have this tension between the primary kind of drama, apart from freezing to death and starving, that you have for the followers of Fingolfin on the Helcaraxa in this episode, is the tension between Fingolfin and Galadriel. But I wanted to kind of tease that out a little bit more. I think we need to work on the premises here. The thing that was least clear to me in reading it was, what's Galadriel's plan? Like, what she doesn't like what Fingolfin is doing. Meaning what? Like, the problem is to have them disagree in how leadership should happen. What they don't have is the option for having alternative plans for what to do, right? Like, he says we need to go on. What's she gonna say? No, we should not go on, or we should go back. Like, it's too late to go back. Everybody should be able to see it's too late to go back. Like, they know they're not going to survive the entire trip retracing their steps. Their only hope is to go on. It just seems kind of dumb or foolish to argue anything other than going on. So therefore, if they're going to disagree, and I like their disagreement, I'm not conceptually disagreeing. I'm just wanting to iron out on what basis are they disagreeing. Right. What's the nature of their leadership struggle? So
it's not so much that Galadriel has like this awesome option,
right?
That she's putting forward that Fingolfin's not going for,
right?
She feels like he's taking this way too lightly. Like, she doesn't even he doesn't even care that they're clearly all going to die. And what she's thinking is that we need to come up with a solution to this problem because what we're doing isn't working. Okay? Like, there's no end. There's no visible end to what we're doing. She may not have the solution on hand. She doesn't have it on her to figure out what the solution is. But what she doesn't realize is that Fingolfin's kind of already thought that through.
Right.
It looks like he hasn't thought it through, because if he had thought it through, he'd be way more concerned. Like, he's off having conversations about birthdays and stuff like that.
Well, it's hard because here's my objection, is that I can't imagine Fingolfin acting in a way that actually leads us to believe that he really is taking it lightly. If what he's doing that leads her to think he's taking it lightly is essentially just trying to keep people's morale up and keep them hoping and moving forward, for her to argue against that makes her look dumb. Like, no, like, let's trash everybody's morale. That's a much better plan. Like, it's hard for me to find a positive thing for her to be for, you know?
Right. Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I've had a number of discussions of the kind that her and Galadriel, that Galadriel and Fingolfin are having in this scene. I've had those conversations many times.
Right.
Where it appears to a concerned observer that I'm not concerned.
Right. No, I understand, but again, I'm feeling in these circumstances. Okay, two things. One, the most important thing. Is this true? Yes. The most important thing that comes out of the entire Helcaraxa arc is Fingolfin as leader, right? Fingolfin's growth so that when Fingolfin is hailed as the High King of the Noldor afterwards, it is like good and natural, and he has totally earned this. The last of that kind of annoying Fingolfin that you guys permitted me to have in season 2 dies on the Helcaraxa, right?
Yes.
He is going to be reforged like Ringil in the crossing of the Helcaraxa. So the Fingolfin who emerges from the Helcaraxa is like the reforged blade, right? That's what I love about that. By the way, when does that happen, the reforging? Next season? Do we get the
season 4?
Absolutely, season 4, yeah.
It's got to be. There's no time. If they could establish a forge, then they would be able to do a lot of other things, wouldn't they? So yeah, okay, right. Anyway, so it has to be in memoriam, I guess, afterwards, which is fine. But anyway, whatever. The point is, that his emergence as a leader. So we need to really show. Our number one priority, therefore, is to convey what he is learning about being a leader and him taking responsibility for the Noldor as a leader. So even having him act in a way which is potentially ambiguous and might be interpreted as him not caring what's going on would, I think, be kind of disastrous for his character. We need to make sure that there can be no question that he is becoming a good leader, because that's the number one that's way more important than any issues that Galadriel has. Like, better for Galadriel to have no issues at all than for Fingolfin's leadership to be brought into doubt. Like, everybody should know, including, especially, the viewers, that everything is fine. In which case, if Galadriel is objecting, then it makes her look the fool. And I don't want her to look the fool either. Here's my potential solution to this problem. Because I do have a potential solution. The one angle that I can think of that they could differ, because they can't differ on the plan of what to do, right? Because, like, keep walking is pretty much the plan. I mean, there's as you say, there's really nothing else to suggest. But there is one point on which they can really differ, and which would have a really important effect, and that is the motivation, right? What is there to keep what will keep you moving? What will keep you going? Why shouldn't you just lie down and die? Right? Because at this point in the crossing of the Helcaraxa, in the last stretch of the crossing of the Helcaraxa, that's what you need, right? Before, and this reflects the conversation we had before, they needed a reason to embark, right? Now, they need a reason to not just lie down and die, which would be by far the easiest thing, as they're all, like, now starving, and many of them are dying all the time. They have lots of reasons to give up hope and think that they're not, any of them, going to survive. What is it that's going to keep them going? And so ultimately, I think the real question becomes, is that thing that keeps you going the positive thing, right? Is it hope for the good, or is it anger against the evil that keeps you going? And I could imagine Fingolfin and Galadriel differing on that point, having Galadriel become the spokesperson. She could still, Angrod, who was a spokesperson before, can still be speaking for it, right? We could have Turgon, as you guys, I think, were suggesting. Turgon is like he's the pessimistic one, right? So we could give someone be the spokesperson for we might as well all lie down and die point of view, right? We can actually have somebody say that. I don't know if we necessarily want to make that Turgon, but given, him still dealing with, grief from the death of Elenwe, we could do that. I think it would be defensible under those circumstances. But have Galadriel be the spokesperson of the Vengeance Party, essentially. Like, it is our, vengeance against the people who did this to us. Like, this is Feanor's fault. He did this to us. Everyone who dies is on him. Like, we must live so that we can take our vengeance against Feanor. And Fingolfin's argument is that's not a way to live, right? That's and remember how this also, the really neat thing is that touches on Feanor's death scene itself. Right? The spirit in which Feanor died, that spirit of I am cursing Morgoth even though it's useless, and despite the fact that I know for a fact it's not going to work, yet I am still going to choose to pour out my spirit in wrath and vengeance and rage against Morgoth. Like, that's how he dies, right? That is the way in which he dies. So to show essentially Galadriel and Angrod and others echoing that, right? Adopting that same kind of attitude. And, Fingolfin has to be then making the argument to say that's not a reason to live. Like, that's not a reason to move forward. And if we do move forward in that, then we're going to be no better than Feanor. Heck, we might end up no better than Morgoth. If that's what takes us into Middle-earth, then it will be better for us to have died than to arrive in Middle-earth like that. And so the sort of, so therefore we show him not only showing courage, not only showing care for the people, but the wisdom for them not only to survive, but to survive as the good guys when they get there, right? Anyway, so that was my thought as to like how that conflict might work in ways that kind of fit better with the other themes of the story, and because there I think we can have radical disagreement. It's the only subject on which I can imagine them having radical disagreement. I mean, they're all going to agree that they'd quite like to eat, and they'd quite like to warm up, and they'd quite like to get there, and there's no point in going back. But that they could disagree on, what it's worth. And this also, of course, sets up Fingolfin's role when they meet with the Feanorians, right? Why is it that they do not immediately fall upon the Feanorians and start, kinslaying part 2? And the reason is Fingolfin has already prepared them to resist that temptation. And he'd have to make another speech and probably hold back at least one or two people, like Angrod, who are still quite keen to do it. But Galadriel herself would already have changed her mind at that point as well. So this would be a lesson that Galadriel learns. Is this a way that we could make this, is there a way we can make this lesson relevant for Galadriel later on?
Well, one thing that I'd like to be careful of is not to telegraph too hard that there's not going to be conflict between Fingolfin and the Feanorians.
Sure.
Like, we don't want it to be a foregone conclusion that everything is going to work out fine when we get there, because we're going to try to use that as a point of contention.
Yep.
There.
Yeah. No. Agreed. Agreed.
One thing that we maybe it's not clear. One thing that we had happening here is Galadriel's kind of accusing Fingolfin of being a little dishonest with his people, by telling them that it's going to be fine, just keep going, which isn't necessarily untrue, because he doesn't know.
Well, but see, again, I don't like that argument from her, because again, like, what the heck is he supposed to say? I mean, it's the issue there is hope, right? And he's arguing he is arguing for hope. What's he going to do? Argue against it? Like, I think we should despair. That's my argument, right? And I think we should, what's more, encourage everybody else to despair. Like, she's not going to say that. Who's going to say that, right? Again, only an idiot is going to say it. Well, sure, but we don't want it to be Galadriel, right? I mean, yeah, sure, we can have somebody be like Job's wife and say curse God and die, but I don't think we want that to be Galadriel. It's not really a tenable. It is an understandable reaction, but it's not a tenable argument. It's not like an alternative leadership approach, right? I mean, there's no.
Right, that's the challenge here, is trying to figure out what Galadriel's idea is. It's okay for her to be unhappy with Fingolfin's leadership, but anything that she would want to do in opposition to that makes her an idiot or a bad person, and that's not what we want to do with her character either. So it is a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. But which is why, because again, I think that like, use hatred as the fire to keep you warm and keep you going, right? Is very understandable, and it's not dumb, because it could work, right? It's a viable approach. It's a viable leadership approach. To say, let's focus on the vengeance that we are going to take for this, let every shiver and every, every suffering that you are experiencing right now, every loss that we've had, let it fuel your desire to get to the end of this and take vengeance on those who did this to us. That is a totally defensible survival technique, and would...
That has to fail is what you're... is that we have to show that failing.
We have to show that Fingolfin does not accept that, and that at least the majority accept it. Now, I agree with you, Nick. We need to keep it alive, right? So that we do have that tension. But I think that tension can come from the fact that it's obvious that there are many people who think that way, right? And although Fingolfin argues against it and does not embrace that, and he... leads people to be thinking, to be resting on hope, on positive hope for the future, rather than on, the taking of vengeance against, just like hatred and wrath and vengeance being the fuel that keeps them alive. Not everybody thinks that way, right? So there can still be plenty of hotheads that might lead to disaster, so that we can still retain, I agree with you, that kind of tension in Mithrin. But
so the plot arc that you're looking for is... they start out with Fingolfin embracing hope rather than vengeance, and for the episode to end with Fingolfin embracing hope rather than vengeance.
Convincing Galadriel to embrace hope rather than vengeance. Convincing Galadriel that her path is the path of disaster, and that if she pursues that path... If Galadriel goes that way and keeps going that way, then, she makes a speech about what that looks like down the road, right? That's the path. That's the path that leads, to her being the Dark Lady of Middle-earth, right? The fact that that's a viable option for her, that's a real potential, is something that we can... That's, I think, that a kind of seed that we can sow there.
The thing that I'm concerned about is still that if this is Fingolfin's point, if Fingolfin's making this case throughout this whole episode, that it kind of takes... It takes a little bit of the wind out of the sails of asking the viewer to believe that Fingolfin might use his army against the Feanorians.
It's Marielle has just said, assuming that some of the audience has seen Game of Thrones, they shouldn't be operating under the assumption that the followers will do what the leaders want.
That's true, but
that's kind of but that's kind of where I am too. I mean, it's... First of all, let's remember that the army that he's leading, the people that he's leading, are like his people and the people of Finarfin. Not to mention the fact that it's not like the elves have a robust history of complete dictatorship by the king, right? Just because he says they really should not, that he does not want to be gunning for vengeance as soon as they arrive in Middle-earth, doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else is going to go along with that, right? I mean, the people of some of the people of Finarfin, if Angrod wants to lead his people off into battle, he could totally do that, right?
So you want to set up the conflict as not being between Fingolfin and the Feanorians, but other people and the Feanorians?
I don't think that we need to depict all of those who came with Fingolfin across the Helcaraxa as an utterly united front, is what I'm saying.
No, I understand
And
that.
of these things, what we're setting is the trajectory for Fingolfin to emerge from everybody. The people who followed him and the Feanorians that are there, that when everybody looks to him and says, this is the dude who should be High King over all of the Noldor, it should make sense. And he needs to be the one that has to be rooted in the wisdom with which he handles this whole situation, I think. If it's not, then it's not going to look deserved. So I think that the tension needn't come from wavering and changing within him here, but him navigating the leadership challenges of not only like helping keep everybody going and not giving up. Like, so his first leadership challenge here is how to keep people going and prevent them giving up, right? And then also not to like to dedicate themselves to wrath and set out like gung ho for Kinslaying Part 2 is going to be part of this challenge. But that challenge isn't going to be ended here, right? This conversation with Galadriel is the first stage of that. There's going to be more of that because there will still be people who will be gunning for Kinslaying Part 2 when they arrive, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I'm not really so okay. So when Fingolfin reforges his sword into Ringel.
Yes.
At this point, you are not imagining that we should expect the audience to be wondering whether he intends it to be used against Morgoth or against the Feanorians. We are completely abandoning that potential.
I'm fine. Okay, I mean, on the one hand, I'm not saying that Fingolfin should never have any like temptation, that like when he is confronting the Feanorians, he shouldn't be upset, that we need to like completely kind of neuter him in that sort of way. We can show him like at times having difficulty following his own policy, but no, I don't think we should have him forging Ringil with the intention or even like entertaining the potential of using it against the Feanorians. I don't think that we should do that.
No, I don't think that we should either. I'm asking whether or not the audience should know. Like,
I think that concealing that from the audience is not worth the cost. The cost of undermining his leadership. I think that showing him as being the awesome, wise, also powerful, also, that's the scene that we're giving him at the end of episode 13 at the gates of Angband is awesome, right? We're showing his strength. We're showing his so he's not just like becoming Finarfin Part 2, right? He's not just becoming like the mediator and like, let's all get along. He is also the strong war leader. There's war policy involved in this, right? And his resolution against Morgoth. That can be part, of course, of his argument against Galadriel. It's not just that he's become a pacifist, right? But that like, let us not get confused who the enemy is here, right? And if we set out in vengeance against Feanor and his sons, we are not only becoming like Morgoth, we're also doing Morgoth's work directly by enabling him to come in and destroy all of us. So it is foolish as well as wicked for us to meet violence with violence and try to avenge kinslaying with kinslaying. To meet betrayal with betrayal. That's wrong and bad, and he should argue against that. But again, this doesn't make him weak. It doesn't make him a pacifist. And I think that I do think that we need to make him really firm on that in order to show, because he is going to be steering the course. He's the king, right? He is going to be steering the course. He is the one whose voice is going to win out, and how the Leaguer of Angband is going to be established. That ultimately they need to put their differences aside, they need to join together and fight against Morgoth. So do we need...
I mean, I guess he can say that Feanor will receive his justice. Like, that way we're not completely abandoning.
See, I think
conflict.
that you are wanting to you want the audience to be in doubt as to whether or not Fingolfin is going to go for Feanor when he arrives there. Like, you want to preserve that tension until the last second.
No, that tension's completely gone because Feanor's dead.
No, I know that, but he doesn't know that.
Right.
I don't care about deceiving the audience on this. Like, I don't think that we need to withhold this from the audience, or rather, again, I think the cost of withholding the resolution of Fingolfin is way too high for the return. It matters very little to me that they know what he really thinks. He's the leader. He needs to be communicating what he really thinks. In as much as people are left in doubt what he's planning to do, he's being a crappy leader, and I want to show him being a good leader. That's what's way more important to me than any kind of ways in which we could be trying to manipulate our audience through that. You see what I mean?
So we definitely don't want him to be certain admirals of certain resistances of certain Star Wars universes.
Right, because that was a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So, Nick, to get back to your point about the reforging of Ringel, he broke that sword when he said, "And I'm not going to do any more kinslaying."
Yes.
So if he reforges it and then shows up to a meeting with the Feanorians wearing it, they can draw their own conclusions from that might not be his intention. So we can still do something with the tension in Feanor's camp without Fingolfin having to go around saying,
I see he's reforged the anti-kinslaying sword. That can't be good. Right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the only other thing is that, like, one of the things in my reading of the Silmarillion, at least, that one of the major reasons why the conflict between the Feanorians and Fingolfin's host does not break out has to do with Fingon's rescue of Maedhros.
Yes.
And
Maedhros' abdication. Yeah.
That I just don't want to be taking away from that by saying Fingolfin never intended for there to be conflict between his host and the Feanorians.
Right. No, I agree, but at the same time, if we don't have Fingolfin be the reason there is not conflict at first, and so essentially to take that idea to its extreme, right? If we have Fingolfin totally okay with attacking the Feanorians, and battle is going to totally break out really soon, until Fingon, acting on his own, does the thing that brings about peace, then we've totally undermined Fingolfin. And again, again, that's not a price I'm willing to pay, even for elevating the awesomeness of the Fingon scene. I agree that that's really important, but to me, what it's important for is convincing other people, right? Fingolfin is firm about what needs to be done. The reason what he's done happens, like, he doesn't have the kind of authority. He's not going to start executing people if they don't agree with him, right? This is not how he's going to assert his power. He's clear on what should happen. He's the reason why they don't like charge when they see each other, or at least why the people of Fingolfin don't charge when they initially come down, right? There is an uneasy peace. It's still uneasy because not everybody agrees with him, right? He's still having to hold back the people who really want to attack. And then the Feanorians, right? What's their perspective on this? It's the actions of Fingon and Maedhros have the effect of helping to pacify everybody else, right? Fingon is basically going to shame his own brothers and cousins, right, by his action, and that's going to help to quell them, not pacify them utterly, right? They're still going to be bad blood, right? But they get shamed into going along. Into agreeing with Fingolfin by the actions of Fingon, right? And then Maedhros' actions bring the Feanorians into line, right? Mm. And also Fingon's action, impacts the Feanorians and their side of it. But exactly, as Marielle says, we can have a lot of tension despite Fingolfin's wishes. That's exactly where I see the tension coming in. So it's not that Fingolfin is wavering. It's just that ultimately the wise policy of Fingolfin is ultimately going to be the one that is followed, but it's not because he's like able to like dictate things absolutely.
Okay. I mean, I think everybody's got some really good points, and we'll have to kind of revisit that plot line and figure out how to make all this work.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I'm 100% sold on this, but that's okay. And if we keep going around and around on this, we're never going to get to episode 13. So why don't we do that?
True. Okay, cool. Well, that's actually one of the biggest things I wanted to talk about today anyway. So that was, I knew that this was going to be the kind of weightiest. I think it's the only, let's see, is this true? Yeah, I think this is the only like major thing that I had an issue with. I mean, there's some other like questions that I had or sort of small like suggestions, but this is the.
I'll be honest. We really struggled with this one because, like, quite honestly, more of the man versus environment plot, plot dynamic just didn't feel like it was strong enough.
Yes.
Maybe to carry them through this episode. So.
Yep, agreed. And I really like the concept, the overall concept of, the kind of Galadriel gets uppity concept, the idea of her, one of the continuous subplots, right? And sometimes it's going to be a fairly deeply submerged subplot, but one of the sort of subplots through the entire first age is, like the education of Galadriel, right? Galadriel's going to become who she's going to be in the second and third age, not by being a primary player in all of the events of the first age, but by being like a secondary background player and an observer of all these things and learning stuff, both from, of course, in her direct tutorial by Melian, but also all these other things. So, yeah. Anyway, cool. Yeah. All right. So let's do episode 13. Let us move on. Let's see, things you guys wanted to emphasize. I like The Sun Also Rises, but I do have a suggestion for a better title. A better title would be Also The Sun Rises, right? What do you think? Anyway, okay. Maybe it's not
there were some suggestions better than my stupid idea there. Let's see. I think Felivrin had suggested a new age, since the rising of the sun kind of kicks off the first age.
Yes.
And Nick's idea was Flame of the West.
Ooh.
Since that's what Andoril is actually named for, is Narsil, which is the sun. Anyway.
Narsil in at the end of this episode, so.
Yeah, that too. But so either of those are better than The Sun Also Rises.
Yeah. But less funny.
Or also The Sun Rises.
I know. It's so much less funny, though. But anyway, yeah, I agree. Yeah. Marielle, I was also just thinking of the word dawn as well. That was going to be my serious suggestion, was just dawn. But Flame of the West, that's kind of hard to argue against, actually. Especially since by this time it will have been, what, 2 episodes? It's episode 11 that we get the council? Right? The debate? Is that right? Or is that 12?
Which council?
The decision to do the sun and moon, like we can't invade, so let's do something else.
11.
11. Okay.
It's 11. Yeah. Okay. So just a little reminder, like, the sun. Remember, the sun is the Valar acting, right? That might be good. Anyway. Okay. Okay, the Doriath plotline. So you guys are talking about the Doriath plotline being rather weak. Totally agree with that, because of course that's natural, obviously, because like we've culminated the plot, the Doriath plot, with the establishment of the girdle in the previous episode. That was, as I was reading it, that was my first question. Was what's the point of the little Beleg mini plot? I do see what it gets to, which is to demonstrate the power of the girdle of Melian. I don't know that we need to do it. I'm not sure we don't ditch it.
Well, one thing is we can't just abandon them.
We don't, but we have the. I loved their extended sunrise scene, and the dancing of Luthien and the flowers and everything. So we could do that with, So how about we just kind of combine things, right? So, in the Doriath scene, in our sunrise montage, right, we get the rising of the sun. As the sun rises, Thingol and the army return to Menegroth, right, and Luthien and they come out to greet them, and Luthien is dancing and the flowers are springing as, Thingol and Melian are reunited, and everybody comes back home and everyone is happy and nobody even has to say anything, right? But that settles
that
things.
Is abandonment.
What? No, it's not abandonment. It's completion. Their story is done, and we're showing the resolution of that plotline.
Yes, that is a problem that we ended their story before ending the arc of the season,
which is fine. I don't think it's a problem at all. I mean, we're showing.
I get that. I get that. I've known that having plot arcs for the season coincide with each other hasn't been something that you've cared about.
No, it's not. Because again, it's not. I don't see why we have to be. I mean, that seems like slavery to me, like imposing artificial rules on ourselves that we don't have to abide by. Like, yes, the overall season arc needs to make sense, but we're tying them into the overall season arc very plainly by giving them one of the most extended sunrise scenes, right? And we're showing the peaceful resolution of the plot, because there were very few things that were left undone, but the last of them we're bringing in. So we're leaving them in the right place. We're establishing we're not finally closing their arc until Thingol comes home, and we show what do we show at the end? We show exactly what we need to establish moving into season 4, which is Doriath as a peaceful, sheltered now sheltered realm in which there is light and flowers and song and harmony, and there's Thingol and Melian, and we've got Cyros and some of the green elves who are there too. So we've got this as the center of the non-Noldorin power, and now sheltered by the girdle of Melian. Season 4 is plenty of time, I think, to establish the fact that, yes, the girdle is a stable thing. It's we can show that visually, right? If we want to, but I don't even think that we need to. So season 4 will be plenty of time to show girdle still there, right? And it is effective against people who are trying to get in. I'm
not super concerned with that. I'm much more concerned with not giving them anything to do.
Why do they need
in
to
the
do
finale
something?
episode?
Why do they need to do something? Or rather, what do they need to do?
Because they're an important part of the overall.
Which is why we feature them, and they are part of the overall story. But again, if there's nothing that they need to do, why do we have to have them do something?
Well,
I mean, they're done. Well, I mean, or rather, no. I guess the argument I would want to make instead is they are doing something. They are coming together and reestablish. We last saw them, threatened by the spiders and on the verge of death until the girdle comes in and the spiders are driven away. So they do something, which is reestablish the strength and peace of their kingdom now that the spiders are gone.
They just should have been doing it here. Is what I'm saying. But because of the way that
the spiders.
Because of the way that the season was structured, we just couldn't maintain that.
I disagree.
For 3 episodes.
I disagree. It's not. I would not want the establishment of the girdle and the spiders running away be the last thing we see from them. That would not. To me, that's not resolution. That's not the last thing that they do. The last thing that they do, the end of their action, is to reestablish Doriath. Remember, Doriath has never been established. The establishment of Doriath has been that's the plot line, right? From the beginning, when they're kind of when they're sort of they're kind of living wild and but they don't have Menegroth yet, and the girdle isn't established, and anyway, so the establishment of Doriath and the kingdom of Doriath and what that means is ultimately the plot line. So the final action is not the kicking out of the spiders. That's sort of the big dramatic turning point there. At the end, that's like, so saving it. The real action at the end is like the final establishment of the kingdom of Doriath. There's Menegroth, and it's safe, and the girdle is established, and there's Thingol and Melian, and there's Luthien. Like that is the action.
Yeah, no one's arguing against that. What I'm saying is that, in addition to having reactions to the sun at the very end of the episode, there should have been a resolution to the pinnacle of their plot arc, of their tension arc in this episode. It is what it is. It's
honestly, I don't know. This just sounds to me like another one of those ways in which you are fixated on like the traditional ways of doing these things in TV storytelling, and I am not.
I know, I'm fixated on making a good show. I know.
No, you're fixated on the fact the only way to make a good show is to follow the traditional rules. is where I would say we're differing.
I think the idea
of a script writer to be able to break those rules effectively, then that probably wouldn't be as much of an issue, I imagine. I don't have that kind of confidence in myself there.
Okay.
But
so we basically are agreed that we need that first scene where Thingol returns to Menegroth and they say the word Doriath for the first time. Like, that needs to happen in this episode, correct? Everyone likes that.
Sure.
And we like the part with the sun.
And the part with the sun. Yeah.
Right. So what's being requested is that we maybe cut back on the Beleg being chased by cats outside
the
of
Beleg plot. I think that can just be cut. I don't think we need it at all. That's my argument.
All right. Is there going to be an opportunity in season 4 to demonstrate how the girdle works to keep out bad things?
Plenty of opportunity.
I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, we can definitely find.
Okay, because as long as we have covered that, then if we want to replace some of the Beleg scenes with some other Meanwhile in Doriath scene establishing the kingdom, or Thingol and Melian's reunion, or we could probably rework it to make it more Doriath focused rather than the adventures of Beleg and his stalker cats.
Yes, that seems to me a sideline, which is unlikely to. It just seems weird. Okay. And
I don't disagree with you there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we can have a Beleg and Mablung scene where they get to see each other again and talk about their different adventures. I mean, we can do something in Doriath.
By the way,
that focuses on the story you want to tell here.
Well, that's it. I mean, and it's like there doesn't have to be. I mean, I don't think there has to be, or the resolution of tension that happens is like when they all come together, like the uncertainty of like what happened. This is them putting away their weapons and building something, so that we don't have to end their story, on the battlefield, essentially. We can end their story with, the homecoming after the battlefield, basically. And that seems to me a perfectly fine thing to have happened in the last episode. Now, I mean, I would agree if we did nothing but that if the entire episode 13 consisted of nothing but essentially, happy resolutions and no kind of, dramatic action at all, that would be a kind of a disappointing episode 13, probably. But yeah.
I think that we can both agree that the structure of the last episode, or like the structure of the plot arc for the season, is a little wonky at the end of the season.
Oh, well, I've felt that way. That's why you remember I wasn't 100% sold on ending it here at all for that reason. I was
right.
Yeah. No, exactly. This is the ending of this season is weird. It is so much, we have ended the first 2 seasons with cataclysmic action, right? And we don't have any cataclysmic action at the end. Now, you could say, I mean, I know we've been through this before, right? The Rising of the Sun is at least as momentous as the other ones, and I get that, but yeah.
Well, I'm just saying that I think that the problems that we're having here can be can be solved with better season arc planning in the future. That's it, and that's not like that's just a general thing. And we've been learning so much stuff as we go in this whole process. When I look back at the outlines that we read for season 1, I'm like, wow, these are terrible.
Well, that's what always happens, right? Whenever you look back at your previous work, it's always as you develop and go. Yeah. No, I agree.
There's a reasonable shot that by the time that we're finished with all this, when we're all old and gray, that we would actually be competent at actually making a television.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Exactly. Okay, let's see. Mario, I don't want to get too distracted on this. Mario is accusing me of is paralleling my arguments with being an advocate for free verse and poetry. Let me just say very briefly, Mario, it's nothing like that. What it is like is an argument against the people who the narrow-minded critics who said that Shakespeare was doing something bad by breaking the unity of place and the unity of time. And there's people who said, no, in a play, you have to maintain the unity of place and the unity of time. And Shakespeare saying, that's an arbitrary limitation on storytelling, and I'm not going to do it. That's the parallel. It's not saying we need think nothing about structure of any. Of course, we should have structure. We just shouldn't have to follow arbitrary external rules and make sure everything follows the same shape. It's okay if the story calls for it, to have this, to tell the story that we're telling without having to make it conform to arbitrary external definitions. That's all.
They can seem arbitrary. There is a certain amount of expectation on the part of the viewer.
Okay.
And
sometimes that expectation will be disappointed.
Right, and that's okay.
Yeah. All I'm arguing is not to be a slave to it. I'm not saying to disregard it. I'm just saying not to be a slave to it. And I think that that idea of saying we have to have resolution of the main action in the final episode, that's being a slave to it. Not in every plot line and not all the time.
I killed Feanor in the first or second act of an episode, so.
Right, exactly. No, that's cool. I mean, the death of Feanor is a great example of not conforming with the expectations.
And you can find lots of opportunities of shows that don't do that.
Yeah.
But you also, when you take Shakespeare as your standard of people who are allowed to break the rules, of course Shakespeare can break the rules. He knew what he was doing.
But it's different, actually. The main thing is that, because it's not... Because this is the interesting thing. Those rules are post-Shakespeare, right? Shakespeare didn't even know about those. Right? He wasn't defying those rules. He just was
but the point is, he can do things that work.
But everybody did, is the point. He wasn't alone in doing that. Lots of people did this. It's just that, it's critics who made it like there are rules that have to be folled.
Right, and critics have ruined everything. We know.
Yeah. It's just that. Zach says he thought that all the plot lines being resolved at the same time is kind of unrealistic. Real life is never so clean and tidy. To have everything be sweeping to its conclusion at the same moment. I agree. That doesn't. That feels contrived, and that there's an argument against it for that reason as well. Anyway, yeah. So it's not. I don't think that I don't think that this is the case of having to be like Shakespeare and to have that one has to have the mastery of Shakespeare before one can do this, but rather just being an extreme rule follower is not to be unlike Shakespeare. It's to be at the opposite extreme of Shakespeare. Essentially, it's to and in my opinion, to totally put the cart before the horse. But anyway, okay.
Maybe the first time I've ever been called an extreme rule follower, so I appreciate that.
I'm not accusing you of that. I'm just saying that that you know, we don't want to be that.
Do I strike you as a particularly compliant individual?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I think you do care more about the sort of the conventions of screenwriting conventions than I do. So, but that's not a very high standard in itself. I do have a couple other questions though about the episode that should be less contentious. One is why is Kellegorm scouting? What's going on with the Kellegorm scouting? I wasn't totally following that.
Oh, he's supposed to have wanted some time away from his family just because they're annoying.
That's understandable, yeah.
But also to figure out what Morgoth's up to, because if they just refuse to treat with him,
right,
the general feeling is that Morgoth is going to send an army to crush them.
Okay.
Momentarily, because they don't know what kind of reserve forces he has. We, the audience, is probably aware that Morgoth's forces have been depleted because we just killed a whole army of orcs.
Right.
But the Fëanorians don't know that. So, so Kellegorm is basically looking out to see if Morgoth is sending an army from some other direction at them, because they just want to make sure they're safe in Mithrin.
I agree with that. I don't have any problem. It's not that I felt that action was, inexplicable or anything like that. It makes sense why Kellegorm would want to do it. I guess perhaps I didn't ask my question properly. Why do we want to show him doing it is my main question. It doesn't seem to lead anywhere in the episode. Exactly.
Yeah, the reason we want to show him doing that is specifically to tie the Fëanorian plot into the rest of the arc of the story. Because
to keep the Fëanorians from doing nothing, basically.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we just had a little big long discussion about this.
But see here, this is actually a great illustration because you're right. I would argue that the resolution of the people coming home and flowers springing under Luthien's feet, that is that's something that happens. So what the main source of my argument there is that I disagree with calling that nothing happening. That's something happening. You're right that nothing at all is happening with the Fëanorians. There's no motion, there's no resolution, they don't do it. The reestablishing the peace of Doriath is a thing that occurs, right? There is positive movement in the Doriath plot, even though it's not dramatic. It's important. It's a major thing. The Fëanorians are sort of just on pause. They're staying in limbo. Maedhros has been taken. He's getting stapled to the cliff, so something is happening with him. But what are the brothers thinking? What are they doing? What we don't know. So that I agree is a different situation.
They do refuse terms, so that happens. Okay. But that happens early in the episode. So after that, they're sitting around going, what next? And they don't know about the host of Fingolfin yet, so they can't make any plans related to him.
Where do we want to bring them? Do we want to bring them to arming against the people of Fingolfin? If Kellegorm were to go out scouting and to return to them saying, holy cow, Fingolfin has arrived, they actually crossed the Helcaraxa guys, and they look ticked off to me, we better defend ourselves, and they get ready to defend their camp against the people of Fingolfin, that would be a thing that happened.
It would. It
if
would.
That's where we want to take them.
Except that's going to end with Maglor vacillating on the issue and retreating to the other side of the camp because he doesn't want to deal with it. He doesn't know what to do, so his solution is to create space and time in between him and the host of Fingolfin. So, which we had talked about being not particularly that's not super interesting. So keeping them in the dark about it until next season, it makes more. There's more stuff to get into that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, where do we want to leave the Feanorians? Like, what point do we want to bring them to exactly?
I think we can focus on Maglor's totally being out of depth in this situation.
Okay,
because
so
he's
lack of
technically the
leadership.
leader, but
Yeah.
but he's not up to being a leader. And they're all in the reaction stage. But at this point, they're reacting not just to the news they got, but Amrod's dead, Feanor's dead, Mithras is captured.
And probably
They
dead,
have,
as far as they know.
yeah, a chunk of their army just got wiped out. So they're really not in a position to do any of the things they had a goal to do.
Yeah. Could Caligorn
And now they're
report back to them
abandoned in
that
Middle-earth
Mithras is
themselves.
alive? Could he see the stapling?
They're not supposed to know where he is. No one's supposed to know that Mithras is on that cliff, because otherwise someone other than Fingin could have gone to rescue him.
But the point is they don't.
That is true, they don't.
So it be interesting if they do know that he's there, but they just won't rescue him? Because Kurafin wouldn't want to rescue him necessarily, would he? He might want
Maglor
to not
definitely
rescue him.
would.
Maglor definitely would, but does he have the guts and ability to do it?
Right. Maglor does fail Mithras in this event, but to have him knowingly fail him it's one thing when he assumes that Mithras is dead or locked in a dungeon in Angband. It's another thing if he knew he was hanging on a cliff in plain sight and all the hosts of Morgoth have scattered because of the sunlight. All he had to do was walk up to the cliff and somehow get his brother down.
Yeah, that's true.
He knows he's there. That makes Maglor be very... Yeah. I don't know. Which maybe we don't mind making Maglor that weak, but I think it's a little extra.
He's going to look weak enough as it is.
I was going to say, is there a point at which we need Maglor to be strong? I don't know that there is. I mean, I think he can be. He could be a wuss consistently, couldn't he?
Do we really want him to be it's a question of how unlikable do we want him to be, especially since he's going to be the voice of reason later on.
Right.
And he's going to raise Elrond.
Uh-huh. I'd like to at least have the audience
parent figure without having to be necessarily a really strong character. I don't know. I mean, having Maglor, I'm not sure that I dislike having Maglor be kind of the pitiable son of Feanor.
Sure. I mean, Amros is going to give him a run for that, but...
Yeah.
I mean,
both of them are very much trapped by their families.
Yes. But in different ways. I mean, right? Amros's issues are different from Maglor's issues.
Yeah.
So it's not like that's merely redundant. I
would be careful about how many conversations we have with the Feanorians establishing. There's going to be a bunch of conversations, essentially, establishing that everybody has different ideas about what they're supposed to do, and Maglor, the one who should be deciding what they're going to do, isn't. And we kind of already have had one conversation like that towards the beginning of the episode.
Right.
We're probably going to have another one like that at the beginning of the season premiere for season 4.
Yeah.
So I would just kind of be careful how many times we dip into that well.
Yeah. Well, the next... Okay, hang on a second. Let me push back one more time on this argument, though. Mm-hmm. They don't have to know exactly what happens with the sun. So Caligorn sees... He's not gonna come back with a report. Mithras is just hanging out there, and at a moment's notice we can free him, right? He's gonna come back with what he sees, which is Maglor hanging from the cliff with Morgoth with Gron standing right over top of him, and the whole army spread out around, right? So he's gonna come back and say, "There's good news and bad news," right? The good news is Mithras is alive. The bad news is I don't see how we can possibly set him free, or at least this is going to be super difficult and almost impossible. Now, it is true that the trolls will all turn to stone and everybody will scatter when the sun rises, but Caligorn isn't going to see that, right? And they won't necessarily know that happened. So I don't think we by doing that would necessarily put Maglor in the position of just knowing all he's got to do is walk over there and set him free. He wouldn't know that. They could still assume that it was like an impossible task.
Hold on. So here's my question. So what you're saying is that Celegorm sees the confrontation between Fingolfin and what remains of the House of Morgoth.
No.
What he described would have to happen before Fingolfin arrives.
He sees Morgoth stapling him to the cliff.
So he doesn't know that Fingolfin's there.
Nah, he needn't know that Fingolfin's there. But he might also see Fingolfin's army. So, I mean, he could come back with a report of both of those things. Like, I have a bunch of interesting news.
If he does see Fingolfin's army there...
Not there.
Then...
Not there. Near. Not there. Not there.
Okay.
So he wouldn't see the conflict. So he would come back with two separate reports. A, Maedhros is alive and I saw him being imprisoned by Morgoth in a really, really strong place, and this looks kind of hopeless, I gotta say, so there it is. Secondly, I saw Fingolfin leading an armed force. So these are our situations, and this, of course, would be another reason for them to argue. This would give them another argument against trying to rescue Maedhros right now. They're like, can we really dedicate all of our forces to trying to break Maedhros out of this, yes, open air, but still highly unassailable looking prison? Yeah, heavily, massively guarded. If we also know that off on our flank we have an army of an armed force of folks who probably hate us, this is not and is marching in our general direction. Yeah, we should maybe think twice about this. So I mean, again, if you imagine the kind of discussion that would come from that, especially given that you have the subtle and unpleasant Curufin, who would kind of want to leave Maedhros to die in Angband.
I don't think he wants that.
You don't?
Curufin is...
I'm not sure.
No, because he certainly doesn't like Maedhros' leadership, and he would much rather be the guy in charge than let his brother Maedhros be in charge, obviously. But that doesn't mean he wants to kill his brother or leave his brother for dead. He'll do that to Finrod, but later. But he's not going to do it to Maedhros now.
I don't know, but there's a difference between killing somebody and leaving them for dead. He wouldn't have planned it this way. He wouldn't have stuck a knife in him or something. He wouldn't have poisoned him, or smothered him in his sleep. But will he go out of his way to endanger himself in order to rescue him? Not sure that he would. Think he might rather not, because again, he didn't plan it this way. But I think he might think Maedhros is a bigger threat than it's not just that he dislikes Maedhros' leadership. I think that he worries post burning of the ships that Maedhros is going to betray the legacy of their father. They're all bound by the oath, right? But he's already shown with the whole standing aside at the burning of the ships thing that he's not necessarily on board with the full Feanorian project, and his doubts of his leadership could be, I think, a little bit more profound. It's not just that he thinks he might not do a good job. In Curufin's world, Maedhros has shown Maedhros has shown he doesn't have what it takes, right? To be the real Feanorian leader, you've got to be willing to do anything for the sake of achieving the goal, right? And Maedhros obviously is not going to do that. So Maedhros' leadership would be disastrous. So again, I'm not going to off him or anything, but, if circumstances have arrived in this place, then we might as well take advantage. I can see Curufin choosing to take advantage of it and saying, I'm not going to exert myself to get my brother back.
I just think that it's causing us to have a couple of very, very similar scenes, in pretty rapid succession in a single episode.
Which scenes? Maglor being weak scenes?
Well, Maglor being weak while the Feanorians argue back and forth over what they should be doing. We have a scene like that ending in Celegorm removing himself from the situation and going off scouting.
So let's cut that one.
Back, and they do the same thing again.
Let's cut that one. Celegorm is the scout in the cavalry. We've already established that. Let's just have him out with Huon, scouting. All we need to do is we don't have to give the reason why he's scouting. He doesn't have to do it in response to another argument. Let's cut the earlier argument and save the argument for later when he gets back. So we only have one.
Well, the one thing that we did need to have the brothers do in this episode is refuse Morgoth's terms.
Right.
That needs to happen.
That does need to happen.
Preferably at the beginning of the episode. So we do need that scene, because otherwise we're just going to hear it from Morgoth when he taunts Maedhros with it, which sounds like maybe it might not be true.
Right. Yeah, you're right. We do need to have the refusal of the terms, but that doesn't mean we need to have a big behind closed doors Feanorian argument about it.
True.
We just...
I mean, there's the issue of setting up a new conflict in in the latter 20 to 30 minutes of the episode that I have concerns about.
Yeah. All right. Well, A, we're out of time, and B, we don't need to map out the whole thing. I mean, I think we've discussed this sort of issues here and some possibilities. I don't. I agree that ultimately the answer to the question, and this is the answer that Hakan gave like 10 minutes ago, the answer to the question, where do we leave the Feanorians at the end of this episode, is in internal tension, is the in disarray is where we leave them. So, and I think we can agree on that, how exactly we do that. So ultimately, what my whole thing here boils down to is simply, I'm trying to find ways in which we can do that and give a direct outcome to Celegorm's scouting mission, other than just trying to establish the strength of Thangorodrim, which again, like the girdle, I think we can establish that next, as we're establishing the Leaguer of Angband in season 4. We can have plenty of let's probe the strength of Thangorodrim, and just as we're establishing the strength of the girdle, those can all be season 4 things. So if Celegorm is going to go out scouting, which I'm fine having him do, I think he should be scouting Fingolfin or Maedhros or both or whatever. Anyway, that's fine. But if you guys hate the idea of them knowing about Maedhros, and I understand about how it's going to make Curufin too villainous too quickly, that's Marielle's argument. Season 10 Curufin would totally scheme that way, but season 3 Curufin wouldn't yet. That's fine. You're right. Perhaps I have too static an idea of Curufin in my mind. And that's, I'm totally willing to concede on that point. So, okay. I'm willing to agree with Marielle there. And I don't have really strong feelings about how the Feanorian thing should end. I understand that but I do see the challenge here that we want to make sure that we want to give, and again, Nick, thinking about that, comparing and contrasting with Doriath, the reason that I'm comfortable with where the Doriath thing ends and I'm less comfortable with where the Feanorians end is that there is it comes to a nice conclusion. Like the Doriath story comes to a nice, we do wrap up that storyline really well. Our only disagreement was whether or not the wrapping up is sufficient for to happen, to be the action of the final episode. Right. Whereas we don't get much of a wrap up. And I understand there's not going to be a resolution. We're ending in tension and conflict and disarray. So it's not about bringing that to resolution. But we need to find some kind of way to convey the state to which we're going to be carrying over to episode 4 without just having it kind of peter out and end. But anyway, I know that's a real challenge. That seems to me the most challenging plot line to resolve in this episode, really. Fingolfin ends on a great high note. Okay. All right. Awesome. So let me go.
so much for the locations.
So I guess we'll do locations next episode.
Locations next time. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Questions for next time.
It's like I'm psychic.
Exactly. Dave. How did you guess? I can't believe it.
It's like you actually know these people or something.
It's like you've been podcasting with me for 5 years. Yes. Okay. So we're going to do our next session on the 24th, where we're going to be doing the creative contributions. We're going to start with the site, with the locations. We're also going to be looking at other artworks, maps, costumes, creature designs. We're gonna do as much of that as we can in our next session. The casting nominations are still in progress, so we've decreed a deadline for the casting nominations. The nominations will close on June 25th. And then we're going to open voting on the 29th. So the 29th we'll be having that session discussing all those other things. And on that day, we will open the voting for casting. And then we'll do the casting episode in the following episode on the 13th, I think, of July. And then after that, we will do the music session after the casting. And that will be the last session of season 3. All right.
We will finally finish.
Yeah. Yes, Brianna, now would be an excellent time for you to get to work on that art that you keep planning on doing. Now is the perfect time. And there are 3 weeks between now and the next episodes. There's just a little bit of extra time in there. It's not until the 29th. But yeah, now is definitely the time. All right, cool. Excellent. Very good. Okay, so I should run. I'm late for my next appointment already, but thanks everybody for joining me. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.